Kate worked on? You gave us it, Kate,
White paper.
okay.
Do the application. Mhm. Can you do what you do from here if it doesn't come in? No. No, I'm just waiting for Read AI to come in and it's not joining for some reason.
Yeah, because I can remind you if it's easier.
I don't think Read AI would come in. I guess we could get John's computer and just see if it comes in quicker. Nope, there it comes. Here it comes. Okay. Thanks.
And
Jane.
my only thing, you guys, is my presentation.
Right here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You're only right, or whatever, yeah, exactly.
There were so many different things in there.
Anything. Roger, can I make you a copy? Okay. Strong? Or, okay. Alright. You got it. We're gonna kick off, you guys, with our homework. Okay, Kaylee, can you kick us off? Takeaways from the last session, what you've been practicing, along those lines would be amazing. Okay. All right, moving it on over.
Yeah.
Okay, anything stand out for you?
Just going over the software and how in my position I needed to have some work with others.
And that is something that we're very much going to be making a transition about today when it comes to the social awareness piece. Being able to read others in a manner that makes you consider, how do I meet these people in the middle, is really what we're going to be focusing on during our entire time today. So this is all kind of led up to, I know what triggers me. I know who, what, or where triggers me. I have also created a healthy workaround for it, not to diminish it, not to push it down, not to make ourselves ill because our brain is sending us these signals that something is out of balance here, but more about what now is this workaround so that I can not go from that traffic light of green, I'm a little bit agitated, to yellow, I'm feeling more like I'm going to go into this full fight or flight, and now I'm there. Now what do? Do I stay in that moment? So that's really kind of a great kickoff to that. Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, I have kind of two phases, right? An internal customer, so, people I work with and external customer. The first being the internal where, I was looking at the DISC assessment, and obviously seeing that I'm high on D and C, and I've surrounded myself with a lot of I's and S's. So the challenges there of how to manage people that are I's and S's, and how some of the benefits I bring and weaknesses I bring versus the benefits they bring and the weaknesses they bring. And then trying to, for an external customer, you touched on it quick, but meet in the middle. We're in a, customer service based industry, that, I have the challenge of, making sure that Brody Construction, does well on jobs, but also making sure customers are happy that they want to rehire us and continue that relationship. So always trying to find that middle ground of, making sure we do well, but also a customer, feels like they want to hire us and they feel like they did well as well.
Okay. And have you experimented at all?
Yeah, it's always a daily occurrence of, the construction industry is, a very, high conflict industry in some fashion. So it's always, every day something, pops up where, my first instinct is to defend Brody Construction, to the point where a customer feels like there's no budging, there's no movement. So yeah, I would say every day is a bit of trying
Work
to be
in
in the middle.
progress?
Yeah, absolutely.
Work in progress? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Indy?
I guess the biggest thing is just, I'm gonna keep it short and sweet, like using our guys or like Dennis, using more of his input rather than this is what we're gonna do, trying to collaborate, give him a say in it kind of deal,
Mm-hmm,
and then try to piece it together from there.
mm-hmm. And how has that been going?
Good so far.
Okay. All right, wonderful. That's great to hear. Matt?
So, kind of a lot of these good points, but like, on a customer service end, like one of the people that creates conflict in my day is my service manager. But in the same term, like he's very, we need this to do this now, he can be very blunt, and sometimes I have to figure out how to get through to him and how to not be like, no, we didn't, you can't just escalate it and argue with them. You gotta talk to him and try to figure out what are your needs, and his needs are generally just, something from us to get a truck out of the shop because the customers want their truck back. I'm sure these guys know all about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we're trying to do that, as well as trying to figure out ways to break through and communicate to people. I have someone who I actually had a lot of go with, very core on communicating or articulating what he needed, and very like frustrated trying to talk to him, but you have to figure out how to, okay, what do we need, and break it down and try to communicate with him so that he feels like heard and doesn't get all aggravated. And,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm. So this is very much leading towards a realization as part of self-awareness that we have built patterns. And this is the way we do things. This is the way we drive to work. Those are the patterns. But the question really through all of this is, do those patterns still work? So you've had this story that you've created with your service manager. Does that story still make sense? Do you need to write a new story? And really, is this about communication, or is this about that you have a structure that maybe doesn't work for him and you together? Right? And so how do you kind of blow up that structure so that you don't keep on doing the same pattern? We put everything under this guise of communication, right? Like there's this poor communication. This is also asking, if you did a huddle, maybe Monday morning, and you said to him, hey, what does your week look like? How would then maybe the confines of your week change?
we do one on Wednesday,
Mhm.
and he does have things that, he'll bring up, which causes us to go back and look at, hey, we have to reevaluate something, we might have to expedite something. you know, or a process isn't working of how we're sourcing something. So I mean, we do actually do that, and we try to come up with new solutions or new ways to, you know, improve the workflow, improve availability and stuff to them, because obviously X time is money, the customers want their trucks
Right.
back, you know,
Right.
and we hate hearing it because they're like, you know, you don't have to deal with the customer, but in the service side of it, we do not get the brunt of the
Right.
customer frustrations. The service department does,
Right.
and when we're holding them up for
Right.
something that's, hey, it got lost, hey,
Yeah.
you know, whatever. And it does happen, and it's unfortunate. You got this time of year where,
Right.
you know, oh no, UPS decided that they were gonna fly that plane, so your air freight didn't come in, and, you know, but you try to work around that or come up with other solutions or try to find something elsewhere. But all of that is work in progress and learning and just new ways to solve the problem. And we constantly try
Right.
to reevaluate that.
Yeah.
But we do actually, that's our once a week meeting, is we sit down and talk about that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
what our challenges are. And I actually have someone else that leads the back counter for their stuff, and I keep pushing them. I'm like, you need to communicate with these guys, you need to work with these guys, like, you know, so he started to go over every day, you know, at least every morning, like, what do you got going on today? What's happening today?
Right.
What are we hot for? To
Right.
try to catch some of the stuff before.
Yeah, that
It's a total fire drill.
proactiveness versus that reactiveness, right?
Yeah.
Because you keep on using words like solving a problem. And what I'm really asking here is how do we not get there? Like, how do we not get there? And I think those are the type of things you're dealing with a very high problem solver. His problem solving is so high that, again, he's going to push that energy. When the truth of the matter is the problem isn't as big as he's making it, but it is to him. So I think, again, when you're talking about communication, you also have to be able to translate what the message is that you're sending me. Right? That's a really important thing. Are you interpreting it the correct way? Or are you losing sight of the person who's moving that message to even make the right determination? Because everything is a fire drill to him. Everything is important to him. And he does it very direct. That's a kind way to talk about his communication style, right? So he can scare people with that approach. So the more that you can kind of get in front of that, I mean, really, even when you say, hey, you know what, I need you to go over and do this, like, how fun to be me. Like, sure, I want to go over and get yelled at. That sounds great. Let me start off my morning that way, right? So,
He has a good ability to make back counter people go full red light.
yeah, so there you go. So there again, is that communication or is that the preparedness to deal with someone who is a very hot communicator? That's a whole different situation. And so that's what we're really thinking about here. How do we work in a team with people that do go very quickly? I mean, what they say about those people who go very quickly to red is they actually don't have enough water in their brain. And so they snap very, very quickly. So it's very much like a friction. It's like a match. So they do, and it's not like you can drink more water. That's their design. Okay, yeah, that would be a great solution. But again, it's a self-awareness that knowing I have that switch. And that's why it's so important to know your strengths and your design. Not for self-loathing, not for self-judgment, for self-understanding. Right? So thank you. That's a great example. Jack.
So my brain's full of coffee. So that's a couple things that said there kind of related back to things we did in previous classes. So patterns, I know my own, and then the high problem solving, like what you have with that guy. I've learned to kind of give people information and then kind of see where they're at based on choices, options, and kind of let them guide where it goes from there. Obviously, I get a lot of timelines. I do a lot of different projects all the time. So sometimes I have to go and kick the rocks and try to get it going, because some people don't want to make the next decision because whatever reason, they don't want to be wrong, they don't know enough about it. So I try to do more of sharing information and links and what this stuff is. So that way, like whoever the reader is or whoever working with the project has a better understanding of where I'm coming from. And then we kind of work out and go from there.
And again, your preference is to move the message orally, but the brain's preference is actually to see it.
Right.
So again, if you got more into writing, like I love when I saw those guys who did the stick figures on t-shirts, A Good Life or whatever that's called, where they do it hunting and skiing and everything. Well, it's two brothers that just sew t-shirts out of their car, concert t-shirts. And they decided they wanted their own t-shirt line. And the one brother looked at the other brother and said, "Can you draw something?" He said, "No, can you draw something?" And he said, "Well, I can draw a stick figure." And he said, "Well, then why don't we just draw a stick figure?" And they drew a stick figure and are millionaires today based on the fact that they put a rifle in his hand, they put skis on them, they do surfboards. I mean, again, that power of the written word is really interesting. So is there something that you can even do in your project? Let's even say like you have like an infographic, and for each one of your projects, you just handed that over to them and said, "Hey, there's this." Right? And again, now you're giving me something. You're in a different style than I am, but you're giving me something. And that piece of paper, similar to the Bible, kind of puts us on the same realm of what your expectations are of me. Right? Without me feeling uncomfortable in your presence. So again, I'm really asking you to push the envelope on what you've gotten in your head, what it is you think you need, and how this works for other people. Paula.
So one thing I've become more aware of is, so I often see, so I do a lot of project work with, a lot of different people in the company to create training for different departments. And I see it always as an opportunity for improvement. How can we make it better? So I see all processes sort of up for review and improvement. Everyone doesn't always see it that way. They just see it as, let's just document what we've got and push it out there and not make it better. So it's understanding that I'm always going to want to see what the other possibilities are, but everyone isn't on the same page with me. And sometimes it is more appropriate just to get it out there and not make improvements.
Mm-hmm. And again, maybe it isn't now, but maybe it's something that could be reviewed.
Right.
And how do you review it? Is it in the data? Right? Like, are you keeping the appropriate numbers to make sure what's going on in your head is what's going on in reality?
Mhm.
Because you like new things,
Mhm.
because you like to change things up. I'm the exact same way.
Well, someone says it's the way we've always done it. It's like, well, that's a great. way
Yeah,
to
that's a
change it.
trigger for me.
So, yeah.
That's a trigger for me. Yeah, without a doubt.
Make it better.
Without a doubt. And those other things, and we have this with somebody who works for us. She's always looking for adulation. And I'm always looking at improvement. So we're not even coming to the table with the same thing. This adulation is just enough for vomit in my mouth. Like this thing, like, let's talk about, oh my gosh, you made this step forward. This is so wonderful. And oh my gosh. And that need,
Mhm.
that need that she has makes me not want to do it because I'm so genuine that when I do give you a compliment, I mean it. So she's always with me. So she is just pouring on the love. I mean, we just are throwing wheelbarrows of love at this thing. And so that's the other part of it would change. I might take that as an insult. I take that as an improvement. So you and I are very much on the same page. We'd never move forward because we'd always be changing it.
I like to chime in.
Yeah.
I like to chime in because I'm a non-changer. I never really thought I was a non-changer until as the world evolves, right? Because, and as I evolve as a person and get older and all that stuff. So as you guys all know, because I preach it, I am an S. 60%, but still, that 60% is a stop sign for people like you. And I understand how much it triggers you, but you're right. And just hearing him, like, just put it out. You know what I mean? We've never had a training program before, right? That's like, it's so funny. Even when I'm talking to you, I don't even work for you. I'm like, just put it out. Just make the training and put it out. Right. But to your point, they just need to understand and appreciate that change. And that's where the communication
But follow the data because Liz is so
Agreed.
emotional about getting stuff out. See, she's that high problem solver. She wants to get it out. Like we've been talking about it, like way too long.
Mhm.
Now we need to get it out.
But often the reason it's getting put out is because it's trying to solve a problem.
Right,
So I look at it as like, how can this problem be solved too?
right.
So, I'm looking at it as, maybe the documentation isn't, robust enough or something. So how can that, this whole process?
Or maybe it's too robust. That gets back to,
Right.
I just went on a software demonstration and it was so much writing.
Mhm.
And like for my style, I'm like, it's an application that, you can help when somebody is ill. And all I kept on thinking when I was going through the application is, my loved one would be dead, because this is the way I think in PowerPoint. And if I had to go through, then I couldn't. I just look at it and it's too much information. But if there's a picture of my loved one half dead, then I would know to click on that. Right? So again, you have to understand the connection to that piece. So always challenge what's in your head,
Mhm.
because it is your version of the truth. That's why the self-awareness continues to get expanded. Alex?
Well, so to the point of, well, this is the way it's always been done, that's specifically said in here, something I don't like, so I can relate to that. I would say something I've been working on, so the person under me, so I'm higher D and I, she's more, from the assessment she took, she's definitely more S and C. And like, I knew going in, to have this calming effect, which she kind of does, to be honest. But one of the things specifically with that I've been working on is trying to be aware of the different ways that we communicate with each other. And so I think I've been doing a good job with it. I hope, I believe I've been doing a good job with that, but trying to be aware that I can sometimes move really fast through things and move, I guess just move really fast through some things. And so trying to slow down and just be more precise, more aware of who I'm talking to and communicating with. And so that's been a big, I guess, awareness piece.
That's excellent. Excellent, for sure. Roger?
I've been kind of using it more like it. It's hard to even get to them.
Well, again, but you're only dealing with a half-baked brownie when you look at your kids. So you have to give yourself some grace when you're in the, you're talking about an emotional brain. And when you go in there and are logical, that's a kiss of death. So, again, how do you kind of share these lessons that are more coming from a half-baked brownie? So that's what you're dealing with. But something that really struck me when I saw you was how you were talking to me about meetings and how tired you were and you had to go outside. That really struck me when you think about, again, Roger's style and being in that type of environment where a lot of people are talking, not necessarily getting to a particular outcome, and how people don't understand you are taking that withdrawal. And yesterday, when Jean and I were in Rochester, we had gone around the room and we had talked about emotions. And the example I used, and I had no idea this had just happened to one gentleman, is what do you do if somebody comes and bursts out crying? So they just sit down and they burst out crying. What do you do? And that's a really important thing for you to think about, because this particular gentleman, his response to us was, listen, I'm not a therapist. But at the point that somebody is crying and they are completely and totally in that level 3 threat, and you think that they're going to work, that is an absolute impossibility. So leaders today have got to do everything in their power not to get them to that point. And it was clear once we kind of decoded it and diagnosed it, they had just had a layoff and nobody wants to talk about this layoff. And the people are absolutely freaking out. So again, the way in which you perceive, understand, and respond to the emotions and needs of others is this now transition into this social awareness. And each of us have really kind of touched on it. So I'm going to be very curious to go back around the room at the end after we go through our session today and get your takeaways after you have a better sense of exactly what's happening here. So Jean, are
This is
you
my-
okay to start the TED Talk before you?
Oh, let me, yeah, I can do that.
Okay,
If we're ready to
thank you
do
so
it,
much.
sure.
That would be wonderful. So we're gonna kind of start with the video and then we're very much going to be going into this concept. And inside of your presentation, you have workbook pages that you're not gonna see up on the screen. There is definitely something about the art of writing and the art of imprinting on your brain. So you're gonna see that we're gonna transition to more of that workbook, and it's just gonna say workbook, but obviously that's your clue to make a transition for sure. And everybody got a survey last time as well, and I just wanna make sure we get those back. I think yours, I think you did. Yeah, I think you're all set.
Going over people, sorry.
You, because in my family, reading was the primary group activity.
She was going to camp.
And this might sound antisocial to you, but for us, it was really just a different way of being social. You had the animal warmth of your family.
Oh, I'm just gonna pause it and rewind it so we're in the beginning. And then put on closed caption. Good on this side there. There we go.
Told I went off camp for the first time, and my mother packed me a suitcase full of books, which to me seemed like a perfectly natural thing to do, because in my family, reading was the primary group activity. And this might sound antisocial to you, but for us, it was really just a different way of being social. You had the animal warmth of your family sitting right next to you, but you were also free to go roaming around the adventure land inside your own mind. And I had this idea that camp was going to be just like this, but better. I had a vision of 10 girls sitting in a cabin, cozily reading books in their matching nightgowns. Camp was more like a keg party without any alcohol. And on the very first day, our counselor gathered us all together, and she taught us a cheer that she said we would be doing every day for the rest of the summer to instill camp spirit. And it went like this. R-O-W-D-I-E, that's the way we spell rowdy, rowdy, rowdy. Let's get rowdy. Yeah. So I couldn't figure out for the life of me why we were supposed to be so rowdy, or why we had to spell this word incorrectly. I recited the cheer along with everybody else. I did my best. And I just waited for the time that I could go off and read my books. For the first time that I took my book out of my suitcase, the coolest girl in the bunk came up to me and she asked me, why are you being so mellow? Mellow, of course, being the exact opposite of R-O-W-D-I-E. And then the second time I tried it, the counselor came up to me with a concerned expression on her face, and she repeated the point about camp spirit and said we should all really work very hard to be outgoing. And so I put my books away back in their suitcase, and I put them under my bed, and there they stayed for the rest of the summer. And I felt kind of guilty about this. I felt as if the books needed me somehow, and they were calling out to me, and I was forsaking them. But I did forsake them, and I didn't open that suitcase again until I was back home with my family at the end of the summer. Now, I tell you this story about summer camp. I could have told you 50 others just like it. All the times that I got the message that somehow my quiet and introverted style of being was not necessarily the right way to go, and that I should be trying to pass as more of an extrovert. And I always sensed deep down that this was wrong, and that introverts were pretty excellent just as they were. But for years, I denied this intuition. And so I became a Wall Street lawyer, of all things, instead of the writer that I had always longed to be, partly because I needed to prove to myself that I could be bold and assertive too. And I was always going off to crowded bars when I really would have preferred to just have a nice dinner with friends. And I made these self-negating choices so reflexively that I wasn't even aware that I was making them.
This is Mozy, a simple, beautiful tea infuser designed to change where you brew and drink loose leaf tea. Brewing your own loose leaf tea at the
Well,
office.
guys, I don't know how to skip, so we're gonna watch about loose leaf tea. It does indeed.
Mozy.
Oh my God.
Brew and drink the perfect cup of tea anywhere. Here's how it works.
Oh my God. Are you kidding me?
Next, add hot water, attach the lid, and flip upside down for the appropriate steeping time. Finally, put the right side up. and
Oh.
enjoy.
Here you go.
Our drinking style.
No, that isn't.
Teacups. An homage to their tradition.
This
created
is the
a
remote.
multi-sensory design that encourages chemosensation. This means
Now, this is what many introverts do. And it's our loss for sure, but it is also our colleagues' loss and our community's loss. And at the risk of sounding grandiose, it is the world's loss because when it comes to creativity and to leadership, we need introverts doing what they do best. A third to a half of the population are introverts. A third to a half. So that's 1 out of every 2 or 3 people you know. So even if you're an extrovert yourself, I'm talking about your coworkers and your spouses and your children and the person sitting right next to you right now. All of them subject to this bias that is pretty deep and real in our society. We all internalize it from a very early age without even having a language for what we're doing. To see the bias clearly, you need to understand what introversion is. And it's different from being shy. Shyness is about fear of social judgment. Introversion is more about how you respond to stimulation, including social stimulation. So extroverts really crave large amounts of stimulation, whereas introverts feel that they're most alive and they're most switched on and they're most capable when they're in quieter, more low-key environments. Not all the time, these things are an absolute, but a lot of the time. So the key then to maximizing our talents is for us all to put ourselves in a zone of stimulation that is right for us. But now here's where the bias comes in. Our most important institutions, our schools and our workplaces, they are designed mostly for extroverts, and for extroverts need for lots of stimulation. And also, we are living through this belief system. We have a belief system right now that I call the new groupthink, which holds that all creativity and all productivity comes from a very oddly gregarious place. So if you picture the typical classroom nowadays, when I was going to school, we sat in rows. We sat in rows of desks like this, and we did most of our work pretty autonomously. But nowadays, your typical classroom has pods of desks of 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 kids all facing each other. And kids are working in countless group assignments, even in subjects like math and creative writing, which you would think would depend on solo flights of thought. Kids are now expected to act as committee members. And for the kids who prefer to go off by themselves or just to work alone, those kids are seen as outliers often, or worse, as problem cases. And vast majority of teachers reports believing that the ideal student is an extrovert as opposed to an introvert, even though introverts actually get better grades and are more knowledgeable, according to research. Okay, same thing is true in our workplaces. Most of us work in open plan offices without walls, where we are subject to the constant noise and gaze of our coworkers. And when it comes to leadership, introverts are routinely passed over for leadership positions, even though introverts tend to be very careful, much less likely to take outsized risks, which is something we might all favor nowadays. And interesting research by Adam Grant at the Wharton School has found that introverted leaders often deliver better outcomes than extroverts do, because when they are managing proactive employees, they're much more likely to let those employees run with their ideas. Whereas an extrovert can quite unwittingly get so excited about things that they're putting their own stamp on things, and other people's ideas might not as easily then bubble up to the surface. Now, in fact, some of our transformative leaders in history have been introverts. I'll give you some examples. Eleanor Roosevelt, Rosa Parks, Gandhi. All these people describe themselves as quiet and soft-spoken and even shy. And they all took the spotlight, even though every bone in their bodies was telling them not to. And this turns out to have a special power all its own because people could feel that these leaders were at the helm, not because they enjoyed directing others and not out of the pleasure of being looked at. They were there because they had no choice, because they were driven to do what they thought was right. Now, I think at this point it's important for me to say that I actually love extroverts. I always like to say some of my best friends are extroverts, including my beloved husband. And we all fall at different points, of course, along the introvert-extrovert spectrum. You know, even Carl Jung, the psychologist who first popularized these terms, said that there's no such thing as a pure introvert or a pure extrovert. He said that such a man would be in a lunatic asylum if he existed at all. And some people fall smack in the middle of the introvert-extrovert spectrum, and we call these people ambiverts. And I often think that they have the best of all worlds. But many of us do recognize ourselves as one type or the other. And what I'm saying is that culturally, we need a much better balance. We need more of a yin and yang between these two types. You know, this is especially important when it comes to creativity and to productivity, because when psychologists look at the lives of the most creative people, what they find are people who are very good at exchanging ideas and advancing ideas, but who also have a serious streak of introversion in them. And this is because solitude is a crucial ingredient often to creativity. So Darwin, you know, he took long walks alone in the woods and emphatically turned down dinner party invitations. Theodore Geisel, better known as Dr. Seuss, he dreamed up many of his amazing creations in a lonely bell tower office that he had in the back of his house in La Jolla, California. And he was actually afraid to meet the young children who read his books for fear that they were expecting him to be this kind of jolly Santa Claus-like figure and would be disappointed with his more reserved persona. Steve Wozniak invented the first Apple computer, sitting alone in his cubicle in Hewlett-Packard, where he was working at the time. And he says that he never would have become such an expert in the first place had he not been too introverted to leave the house when he was growing up. Now, of course, this does not mean that we should all stop collaborating. And case in point is Steve Wozniak famously coming together with Steve Jobs to start Apple Computer. But it does mean that solitude matters, and that for some people, it is the air that they breathe. And in fact, we have known for centuries about the transcendent power of solitude. It's only recently that we've strangely begun to forget it. If you look at most of the world's major religions, you will find seekers, Moses, Jesus, Buddha, Mohammed, seekers who are going off by themselves alone to the wilderness, where they then have profound epiphanies and revelations that they then bring back to the rest of the community. So no wilderness, no revelations. This is no surprise, though, if you look at the insights of contemporary psychology. You know, it turns out that we can't even be in a group of people without instinctively mirroring and mimicking their opinions. Even about seemingly personal and visceral things like who you're attracted to, you will start aping the beliefs of the people around you without even realizing that that's what you're doing. And groups famously follow the opinions of the most dominant or charismatic person in the room, even though there's zero correlation between being the best talker and having the best ideas. I mean, zero. So you might be following the person with the best ideas, but you might not. And do you really want to leave it up to chance? Much better for everybody to go off by themselves, generate their own ideas, freed from the distortions of group dynamic, and then come together as a team to talk them through in a well-managed environment and take it from there. You know, if all this is true, then why are we getting it so wrong? Why are we setting up our schools this way and our workplaces? And why are we making introverts feel so guilty about wanting to just go off by themselves some of the time? One answer lies deep in our cultural history. Western societies, and in particular the US, have always favored the man of action over the man of contemplation. But in America's early days, we lived in what historians call a culture of character, where we still at that point valued people for their inner selves and their moral rectitude. And if you look at the self-help books from this era, they all had titles with things like character, the grandest thing in the world. And they featured role models like Abraham Lincoln, who was praised for being modest and unassuming. Ralph Waldo Emerson called him a man who does not offend by superiority. But then we hit the 20th century, And we entered a new culture that historians call the culture of personality. You know, what happened is we had evolved from an agricultural economy to a world of big business. And so suddenly people are moving from small towns to the cities. And instead of working alongside people they've known all their lives, now they are having to prove themselves in a crowd of strangers. So quite understandably, qualities like magnetism and charisma suddenly come to seem really important. And sure enough, the self-help books change to meet these new needs. And they start to have names like How to Win Friends and Influence People. And they feature as their role models really great salesmen. So that's the world we're living in today. That's our cultural inheritance. Now, none of this is to say that social skills are unimportant. And I'm also not calling for the abolishing of teamwork at all. You know, the same religions who send their sages off to lonely mountaintops also teach us love and trust. And the problems that we are facing today in fields like science and in economics are so vast and so complex that we are going to need armies of people coming together to solve them, working together. But I am saying that the more freedom that we give introverts to be themselves, the more likely that they are to come up with their own unique solutions to these problems. So now I'd like to share with you what's in my suitcase today. Guess what? Books. With a suitcase full of books. Here's Margaret Atwood, Cat's Eye. Here's a novel by Milan Kundera. And here's The Guide of the Perplexed by Maimonides. But these are not exactly my books. I brought these books with me because they were written by my grandfather's favorite authors. My grandfather was a rabbi, and he was a widower who lived alone in a small apartment in Brooklyn. That was my favorite place in the world when I was growing up, partly because it was filled with a very gentle, very courtly presence, and partly because it was filled with books. I mean, literally, every table, every chair in this apartment had yielded its original function to now serve as a surface for swaying stacks of books. Just like the rest of my family, my grandfather's favorite thing to do in the world was to read. But he also loved his congregation, and you could feel this love in the sermons that he gave every week for the 62 years that he was a rabbi. He would take the fruits of each week's reading, and he would weave these intricate tapestries of ancient and humanist thought, and people would come from all over to hear him speak. But here's the thing about my grandfather. Underneath this ceremonial role, he was really modest and really introverted, so much so that when he delivered these sermons, he had trouble making eye contact with the very same congregation that he'd been speaking to for 62 years. And even away from the podium, when you called him to say hello, he would often end the conversation prematurely for fear that he was taking up too much of your time. But when he died at the age of 94, the police had to close down the streets of his neighborhood to accommodate the crowd of people who came out to mourn him.
Hey, I'm Michael. I work in the
You gotta do this again now.
process, and I use TurboTax. It's a very simple process.
Thank you.
And so these days I try to listen to my grandfather's example in my own way. And so I just published a book about introversion, and it took me about 7 years to write. And for me, that 7 years was like total bliss because, you know, I was reading, I was writing, I was thinking, I was researching. It was my version of my grandfather's hours a day alone in his library. But now, all of a sudden, my job is very different. And my job is to be out here talking about it, talking about introversion. And that's a lot harder for me because as honored as I am to be here with all of you right now, this is not my natural milieu. So I prepared for moments like these as best I could. I spent the last year practicing public speaking every chance I could get. And I called this my year of speaking dangerously. And that actually helped a lot. But I'll tell you, what helps even more is my sense, my belief, my hope that when it comes to our attitudes to introversion and to quiet and to solitude, we truly are poised on the brink of dramatic change, and we are. And so I'm going to leave you now with 3 calls for action for those who share this vision. Number 1, stop the madness for constant group work. Just stop it. Thank you. I want to be clear about what I'm saying because I deeply believe our offices should be encouraging casual, chatty, cafe style types of interactions. You know, the kind where people come together and serendipitously have an exchange of ideas. That is great. That's great for introverts and it's great for extroverts. But we need much more privacy, much more freedom, much more autonomy at work. School, same thing. We need to be teaching kids to work together for sure. But we also need to be teaching them how to work on their own. This is especially important for extroverted children too. They need to work on their own because that is where deep thought comes from, in part. Okay, number 2, go to the wilderness, be like Buddha, have your own revelations. I'm not saying that we all have to now go off and build our own cabins in the woods and never talk to each other again. But I am saying that we could all stand to unplug and get inside our own heads a little more often. Number 3, take a good look at what's inside your own suitcase and why you put it there. So extroverts, maybe your suitcases are also full of books, or maybe they're full of champagne glasses or skydiving equipment. Whatever it is, I hope you take these things out every chance you get and grace us with your energy and your joy. But introverts, you being you, you probably have the impulse to guard very carefully what's inside your own suitcase. And that's okay. But occasionally, just occasionally, I hope you will open up your suitcases for other people to see because the world needs you and it needs the things you carry. So I wish you the best of all possible journeys and the courage. Speak softly. Thank you very much.
You can turn it off. Let me see if I can get this back.
So here we are looking at the introvert and extrovert. We have a super difficult time remembering the initials for some reason, the D, the I, S, and C. But we're very familiar with the introvert extrovert. I don't happen to love that label, but we're familiar with it. So where do the D and I's live? Are they introverts or extroverts? Okay, so then we can safely say that those people that are more in the S and C's tend to have more of those introverted characteristics. All right, again, or a combination of the two. So if we kind of compare this to emotional intelligence, those individuals that have that ability to work within the middle of who they are and the understanding of others are what's called ambiverts, which we don't hear a lot about, but in emotional intelligence, that's what that means. I don't just have to stay in my style. I can absolutely work with other styles. So what are our thoughts? What are our takeaways as we're kind of thinking about our teams, our bosses? Give me 1 second. What's going on in our head?
Very extroverted. There's always something going on. There's always a gathering and sort of where someone who isn't an extrovert doesn't want to be socializing in large groups all the time, how that type of person fits in, or what's their comfort level with various sort of social situations. Yeah.
And what's their withdrawal? Like, what are they giving up for that? Because you have to understand your brain bank. There's a deposit and then there's that withdrawal, right? So when we talk about working most effectively, Roger's got a new group, right? So he's kind of trying to figure out, how do I work best with this particular group? You have Alex who said, listen, I realize that I'm kind of a minority, but he brought in an effervescent person to an introverted group. There was no consideration to how that person was going to land within that introverted group. There's onboarding, but again, you're not thinking about it from the team perspective because we're not really thinking about it from what's best for you. So I think that when you're looking at those D's and I's, more of those extroverts, when you're looking at the introverts and understanding that that processing is very different. And then how are we setting them up within the confines of their job to be the best version of themselves? Or are we trying to make them us? Or we're trying to be more like them? And then there's a price we pay for that, where if we use this knowledge of human design and recognize that everybody's different, then how do we set up the structure so that everybody does the best version of themselves? So Alex, as you're kind of thinking about that with the revelation that you started with in the beginning, how does that kind of make you reflect about, I think it would be safe to say the introverts, just because we're using that language currently?
Yeah, I think I think it puts us in a position of kind of a, I don't want to say a crossroad, but a crossroad of ultimately where this could go one of two ways. It could be extremely great because, you know, she touched on it, right? Introverts have great ideas, extroverts have great ideas. It could be a great collaboration of different personalities, or it could be for lack of a better term, a total failure ultimately, right? Where it just, it can't, they can't interact, they can't, you know, it's just two different types of personalities at the end of the day where it could, you just can't build a relationship with those types of personalities. So I think, you know, it's a bit of a crossroad, I think, at this point, which makes it difficult to, you know, it doesn't help that they're all young too, which, you know, I think if you had, you know, a 50-year-old extrovert or an introvert, I think they're more willing to maybe come out of their shell or meet in the middle somewhere where, you know, everybody is still so green where they're in their shell, right? They go to their comfort zone, they do all that. So I really did myself no favors.
But it's a great leadership experience. It really is, because you've got a tough nut,
Yep.
right? Because you need that analytical brain because of the work that they're doing, right? You need that precision, right? And when you look at, like, it was just interesting because we had a meeting with Joe Outen yesterday, and it was just really interesting to see his perception of where he started with Brett versus where he is today.
Yeah.
So they don't have all their competencies yet in their file folders, right? But what are we giving the team members so that each one of them gets to be successful? And are we giving them the time to come up with solutions so when they come back into the team, they're ready? Or do we expect to talk about that in real time? Because that's how we prefer to talk about it. I much prefer to talk about it in real time than I do, let me send you a note, let me get you an agenda, let me kind of map out what I need you to think about. But for those different styles, they need that. So are we giving them that opportunity to be their best version? Or is everything that we're setting up, is your service manager for your style setting up a relationship that can be as thriving as it is? And he's so much on the other side of you that there's a real challenge. But in your solitude, in your creativity, what can you come up with that's more of a way that works for you that perhaps you can get him to try on even a short-term basis that always ends up being a long-term basis? So I think, again, you know, even as you're looking at what type of structure is Roger setting up for these people, he can very easily say, are they an introvert or an extrovert? It's hard to say, hey, is somebody a high I? Like, this is our love language, so we, of course, remember all of that. So it's great if you know you're a high problem solver and you're a high influencer. But if you very, very quickly, a customer, an employee, you're understanding that they're an extrovert or they're an introvert, then how do you make this space for all of these people to come together? Because again, how do we do weddings, right? Who's sitting at what table? Who doesn't like this person? Like, we're always thinking about who's going to have this joyous time. But rarely are we thinking about how does this all come together so that these people get to be the best version of themselves? Or are we in our head, similar to what we're seeing in our political landscape, thinking, I know what's best? So I coach a leadership group that is literally decades and decades and decades old. And the original founder of this leadership group had an idea in their head of what they wanted it to be. Well, no one wants to be part of this leadership group if we're going to be talking about history. They need skills now. And it's a real challenge for the people who created this group. And they keep on saying to me, I know what they need. Well, they did need that 50 years ago. You were 100% right. It's just they don't need it today. And that's a real challenge because their identity is tied to that history. So how do we, again, set up the space that if we handed over to Jimmy and said, hey, Jimmy, this is your problem to solve. And what I want you to do is I want you to come back and share with me, or when appropriate, share with the group, how do we feel like we get to this? Because if the science is correct, that should be the perfect type of environment for that particular individual to thrive. So again, when we put these self-awareness thoughts on steroids, you see like how this continues to get more complicated and more complicated. And that's why I'm trying to give you simpler words. When you're doing your training, are you going to get more resistance from an introvert than an extrovert? Maybe you get nothing at all, but maybe you haven't set up the space to get something. Because in your head, you got this covered. Where ambiverts, those people can really meet in the middle, can in real time adjust just by looking at you what your style is. So when I get in front of an introvert, my cadence slows. I think to myself, I could have driven to Rochester, opened up a new business, sold it. Come back.
So in this assessment, I'm a high I, but I'm an introvert.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's where I come from when I'm influencing. I think I'm coming from a different place than like a true extrovert is coming from when I am influencing.
What's that secondary dimension?
I don't know.
Yeah, go to your assessment. That's important that you know. So you can go to any one of your graphs, okay?
In my natural style, my D and my S are, pretty much even.
But see where you are in the middle?
Yeah.
So you're really more in an ambivert place. So that's why.
Mm-hmm.
That's why. Where I'm very high I and my D's just behind it.
Oh, okay.
I'm coming from a place of a mission. I have a problem to solve. The company has come to me. So I want to get that problem solved. But the fact of the matter is, I've got to work with people who don't want to solve that problem,
Mm-hmm.
who don't like change, who think I'm full of shit. So it's, I have to do more limboing than you do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why for you, it's going to depend. But you look at, you're very team oriented. This is right under that energy line, that S. You can certainly follow rules and regulations. So you should be able to get to that center in a very thoughtful and situational way.
Mm-hmm.
All right. If you're high on the S and you're high on it, those are more introverted type of tendencies. So again, what you're going to have to be thinking about is, as I look at my room, these are the people that I have to get to.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at the problem solvers, like a Liz, like a Mark Ferrara, I got to play that different.
Mm-hmm.
So you being able to think about that
Mhm.
and see it from other people's perspective, you genuinely can.
Mhm.
Most people had to fake it. Like I had to fake it with introverts. until I really, really understood them, respected them, and very much glad all of my company is S's and C's. But I'm gonna tell you, there are many days I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. Like, I'm gonna go out on the road and they're going, where are you gonna go? And I'm like thinking, I don't know. Where does it take me?
I was just gonna like tag on to that. I was just gonna say along those lines, like taking a disc assessment a couple years ago, mine was a higher S and C. This one is a higher D and I, and both were accurate for at the time, but it's
100%.
something where like I've adapted myself. The Paula's Better Company is very extroverted, and so like I had to adapt myself, and so my natural is more introverted.
Mhm.
But I've had to become more extroverted. And to that point, like that's where so often at the end of the day, like my brain is just, it's fried.
Yeah.
Like I mentally cannot handle anything else.
And I think those are the questions, right? Like, these are the questions. This is all coming to that self-awareness. And the fact of the matter is your brain is always gonna wanna move towards that tribe. You saw what happened to her at camp. It's all gonna wanna move towards that tribe. But the fact of the matter is that tribe healthy for you? And how do you reach that balance? And when do you reach that balance? And that's really what this is very much about, because clearly we honor extroversion. But we see the most impactful leaders, and they are definitely moving more in that S&C space. So that's the reality of where things are going. So we need to be, again, contemplating that. What are your thoughts, Jack, as you're kind of weighing through this?
I think everybody's got to strive to just get to the middle when you're in a leadership role, so you get a better understanding.
And that's really, really what this all comes down to. Any takeaways, Matt, your takeaways from listening to that?
I have a more introverted style, and it is tough to, sometimes adapt. If someone comes at me, I'm like, nope, I'm all set here.
Mhm.
And oftentimes if if the day is just straight chaos, I end up by the end of the day, I'm sitting there shuffling papers, and it's tough to be effective once you're,
Mhm.
at least for me, like, once I'm there, I'm just like,
You're in that
I'm
red
no
zone.
longer accomplishing
Yeah,
anything.
you're in that red
And-
zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, your frontal lobe has gone dark. That's what happens. And his boss is incredibly extroverted. He hasn't met a good theme park he hasn't visited. That's what he does. I mean, primarily on his vacations. He's at a theme park. He's on a cruise. I mean, he is out with people. He's working with people and he vacations with people. So, yeah, you got it. You got it. But again, you see how he's coming at it from his place. And that subliminally is what a leader looks like. And that's why you can absolutely be overwhelmed with that. And so what is your workaround? If I know this about myself, how do I not get in that boat? How do I not get in that boat? See, that's what this comes down to. I know this about myself. How am I more proactive? Haley, what are you thinking about?
I feel like I've learned to become more in the middle just because I'm working with so many departments and so many people every day that I need to be able to adapt to what they're telling me.
Mm-hmm. But the question is, can you stand your ground? See, yeah, and those are the things that you have to be asking yourself, is when it comes to a decision that in your heart you think is better for your team, are you comfortable standing your ground? Because that is the thing with extroverts, is they are going to bowl you over if you're in that different style. If they're a high influencer, they're going to try to convince you. They won't stop talking until they've convinced you. So how do you make sure you're in a space and place where you're very much prepared for that? So let's kind of take a quick break. And then what I'd like you to do is in your workbook, the emotional awareness for extroverts versus introverts. I'd like you to read that and really kind of give me your thoughts on that as we're kind of looking at this whole picture, especially as it relates to your team. So let's take 10 and then we'll come back from there.
Yes, actually, yes. My trip.
Oh, wow, cool. Are you sore?
Actually, I'm not sort of like used to these. Anymore.
Oh, good, that's good.
I would definitely be. Then,
Yeah.
this is good, huh? Within a farm, a animal farm. Refrigerated ice cream on top of the hill,
Where was it?
outdoors, outside of Binghamton. Pretty cool. It was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. The barn, there was a barn that would change,
Mm-hmm.
and then a tractor comes by with a hay wagon and you
Okay.
ride up to the rink. Pretty cool.
You need water?
Oh, you want to did you get any stuff? It's so cool.
Jack, I didn't do which one is in there. And then we do this one for the,
Yeah, do you want green?
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, okay. Give me your cup.
Oh, okay.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I have a shelf full of these Starbucks cups. I finally found one that was plain. I was like, I'll take this one. I gave her the shelf. I was like, look, if you can fit it here, great. If not, someone's got it. Look, we don't have room. We have a small house. as it is.
only did that much too.
She's like, no, I can't. That was good. And like, I saw this one. I really liked it, but I didn't buy it. It's different.
Don't know which superhero. Oh my gosh. That was my builder Ariel. No, to the point of the job.
You have your thing in here?
Yes, sorry. Thank you very much.
Oh, of course.
Oh. Hey, what did I do?
Oh, nice.
What did I do?
Yeah. Did you want to stay in here?
You're more like to figure out. Now. Played against New Jersey Warriors.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, we won both teams.
Nice.
Each side played five. Out there for 3 shifts.
Wow, that's a lot. Fun.
Yeah.
So is this your permanent badge or? was it-
Can you take
Oh,
the
yeah.
picture? Thank you so
Oh, did you
much.
accidentally leave with?
I totally did. Totally. So could you take total responsibility for one extrovert to another?
Totally happy that
Thank you.
shows how secure our system is.
Yeah. You know what the problem was? I was yakking with her. That was the problem. I was being extroverted and I totally forgot it. And I- Thank you. I asked Jean, I said to her, would you mind taking the back roads and dropping it off? And I wasn't even connecting you guys were here. So thank God he's observant.
So do you have any other classes and ceiling devices you're gonna be doing?
Yeah, we're actually going to be doing, I'm gonna be starting to train Sarah. Cause yeah. So I really want her to kind of do like the train the trainer with me and really start making more of the transition. So we have more of an in-house person that's really kind of focused on, bridging that gap because it's all a new doing training. We're trying to figure out a way that this all comes together. Yeah, so we're kind of hitting it from all the different dynamics.
But she's doing
So, yeah, so that's kind of what we're moving into. And I think, it's very reflective of like succession planning, who are those next gen leaders, so all of that is, there's really important decisions. Like I was sharing with them, only 7% of companies make it to their 3rd generation. So, yeah. So if you want to be part of the 7% club, you definitely have to be very thoughtful about the decisions that you make. So I want to pay attention to this particular slide. The term introvert and extrovert, Carol Young, she referenced him in the TED Talk. It refers to how people gain energy. And I want to really focus on gain energy. So if you think that people gain energy in a particular type of environment, again, is that because you gain energy from it? What's very interesting, Alex, about Brett is he's looking for more of that team group, which is highly unusual based on his style, but now he's moving more towards the middle, so is looking for more of that energy, which is a definite transition and change. So how do you kind of set that up so that, again, people are gaining that type of energy? I do this all the time. I grab the clicker and then I make it go quicker. And he took that badge too. Matt took that badge too. I had nothing to do with that badge. All right. So just again, it's kind of like this high level situation. An introvert is someone who primarily gains energy from solitude, deep reflection, meaningful one-on-one interactions. They often prefer quiet environments, thoughtful discussions, and internal processing before speaking and making decisions. So the more, Alex, that you can prepare Brett and Jimmy the better off you're going to be. All right, so those type of things that again wouldn't naturally be coming for you is definitely more. An extrovert is someone who gains energy from social interactions, internal stimulation, and active engagement with others. They tend to be outgoing and expressive and comfortable in group settings. So how does this relate to introversion and extroversion? Again, not everybody's going to fall under this category. Paula had a great question about it. But when you see where she is in comparison to that mid-level, that makes perfect sense in terms of her surfing ability. But where you are is definitely going to make a difference as to how easy or difficult it is for you to serve. When you're looking at the introverted types, you're talking about obviously the S's and the C's. And again, look what happens here. They prefer stability, relationships built over time, a calm environment. How do we make decisions that support that, but also make decisions where they're put in positions where they can grow? So, Alex, if you're going out and meeting somebody in person and you're bringing Jason, you're bringing Brett, again, the more exposure that you're giving them, the better opportunity they have to get more accustomed in a way that isn't incredibly uncomfortable for them. So what I'd like everybody to do is, if you can just kind of go to your workbook and just kind of read through these. And what I'd love you to do is anything from your workbook that is really sticking out for you, something that you think you're experiencing, something that you're now picking up for your team, something along those lines, that would be.
Give me my workbook.
So it's, you're there, Jack. This is your workbook. Social awareness workbook
Okay.
starts
Right.
here, okay?
Yep.
So just to read through those pages. And then inside of that, you are going to see an org chart that looks like this. It's actually just a bunch of squares. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take out that page and I'd like you to list the people that you're working with. So if you could just list their names, not the company, Paula, the people that you're most intimately working on this training with. All right. So who would traditionally be in your group that you'd be having that conversation with? Who's part of your new team, Roger? So after you read the workbook, what I want you to do is I want you to go to that org chart and then put in the names of the people who work for you or work with you. All right, so read those, write the names in, and then when everyone catches up, but very much in your workbook, those lines that are really connecting to you because of the people you work with, circle them. Circle them in your workbook. Like this happened, this is something that I could have used knowing. Really go through that workbook and see how it relates to your current situation. If you get to how an introvert can develop ambivert traits, stop. Don't go to that part of your workbook. So if you get to that, stop. And go to your org chart. Because I took mine all apart and I don't know where it is. Let me do something now.
Sorry, Pam. Put it up. Yeah. Gonna be fun, and real excited, real excited for it. The best part. And she's a that's just what the wins.
People that work for.
But again, feel free, like even Pat, even the service manager, like feel free to put them, because they're like in your realm. Okay, so feel free to put those on. I mean, who are those people that you work most closely with?
What does it? Well, so, yeah, bring it up a bit, before I started. So these are what it's good. It literally went completely reversed. No way. Here, you can eat it, look. Sure. You're more. Oh,
Okay, so what, Jack, what's coming out of the workbook for you? What is really kind of sticking with you that you haven't kind of given thought and consideration to? Does this theory of introvert versus extrovert kind of make it easier for you to very quickly kind of assess where a person's head is at?
To be honest with you, I don't think so. I mean, I think about decent at reading a room. It's more about my ability to approach people that I'm gaining the most insight into,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
it's a new skill to develop to be able to, like we said, the other ones, meet people where they are. That's a really foreign concept to me until we started this, because it's kind of, this is how we do things, this is what it is, so we drag you along, you get off the boat.
Yes.
You know, Air Force and construction, boys.
Okay, again, so, but remembering just by looking at someone, if they're quieter, they're coming at you from a completely
Yeah.
different perspective, right? And they're going to very much assess what's on your face. So they are very much going to use their senses. So if they see something on your face, they're going to react to that. We all do that, but introverts tend to do it more because they are expressionless. So when they see an expression on your face, they're going to start using it to make a determination of whether they go into green, yellow, red. So you've got to be aware of that, even in terms of your approach. If you're not giving them a signal in some type of way, they can often misinterpret. Now I can't even really listen to you because I'm really thinking about how do I protect myself in this situation. So you got to be very, very mindful of that piece of the puzzle. All right. Anything else coming out in these worksheets that you're thinking like, gosh, I could use this. This is something that's really important for me to give thought and consideration to, whether it be for hiring, whether it be for our team meetings, anything really coming out to you that you're giving thought and consideration to. Andy, when you look at the current makeup of your team, what are you seeing?
A blend of both.
Okay.
50-50.
All right. Who did you put like in an introverted category?
Like Kyle and Louie,
Okay.
and then Dennis being more extroverted, and Kyle kind of in the middle, I should say. But
Yeah, I see that
Yeah.
too, because he doesn't, given an opportunity, he doesn't have a hard time giving an opinion.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a blend of all of them,
Mm-hmm,
but each one we handle a little different anyway. So
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Anything coming out in those sheets that you think you can kind of transfer over to?
I guess it's just more like getting their input
Mm-hmm,
versus just saying what we're doing.
mm-hmm.
It's probably the biggest thing out of all of it.
Yeah, so that's really consistently what it's coming down to is this is what we need to do versus really kind of giving them an opportunity to even think about it. So is there something that you could even be doing from a weekly plan or a daily plan or something along those times where you're giving people the time to think?
Yeah, that's how I've been doing it with them.
Mm-hmm,
Let them kind of build their own plan. But be there to like adjust it if need be to like keep on track.
mm-hmm.
So, which has been working better.
Okay, awesome.
Really mainly with like Dennis being the main one.
Right,
But it's working back, gives them a little more say, a little more input,
right.
but I'm still there to kind of like guide it.
Exactly, exactly. And again, kind of using psychology, it's his idea.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you just kind of
Yeah.
try to manipulate it just to make sure you get the appropriate outcome. Yeah, yeah. Alex, your thoughts?
I think, you know, going through a lot of this, I think a lot, is obviously known with introverts for me and the group of guys I work with. But what I've noticed too, a lot is, you know, there's a piece that kind of, it's unique. I'll focus on Jimmy where, you know, he's definitely an introvert, right? But when I'm looking at emotional awareness, an introvert, their strengths are having empathy, deep emotional self-awareness. He doesn't have that, right? Which is unique, because he is an introvert of introverts, right? And so his strengths of being an introvert, I feel like, are not there.
And so, oh my gosh, you got to open up the door to further complication, right? When you look at those engineers and the way that the brain works, often within that engineering realm, there's some type of great brain correlation. So it could be an ADHD, it could be an OCD, there could be some other things going on neurologically that forces them to even be more separated even from that particular category. So what you're dealing with is you're actually dealing with even a more complicated you're going to be a pro if you can turn these guys around.
Good.
Because this exposure, all you having to really get to each one of those and trying to figure out with him, because Jimmy's stress release is to smile. And for him and I, when he smiles after we've had a really difficult conversation and we see that smile, that's almost like he's making fun of us. So we really have to take deep breaths so that we don't get triggered, because that's his stress release. If you've ever heard about people laughing at funerals and things, that's just the way they get it out. So again, even in looking at that, just kind of gives you a classic case exactly of what you're picking up on. Did you connect to even the hiring of that new person, that sheet that really talked about if you're going to be bringing on that person, what is then the differences? Like, how then could you perhaps have prepared them differently for that? So that's just like a great guide that if you're bringing somebody onto the team that is quieter, what does this look like? If you're a quieter person, Roger, how did your org chart look? Like, who are you finding you're surrounded with?
On my team, and then plus a handful of others that deal with
Yeah,
issues on.
yeah. Where are they falling?
Most of them are introverts.
All right, so again, you're in almost an extroverted, because you're primarily customer service, right? Yeah, so again, if you're dealing with people that aren't in that same realm, how do we then prepare your group for more of that external facing? What tools can you give them to be successful? And if you're finding that there is a lot in the introverted category, working and giving them more documents is absolutely going to be really important. So have you mapped out for them even like a plan? This is what the department's going to look like in 3 months. This is what it's going to look like in 6 months. Has any of those things happened?
Not yet, they got put on.
Okay, all right, but again, that's certainly something we can kind of send you a sample of, so you can see it. And then what you could even do with Suzanne, who's a very high problem solver, so she'll be like, wait. What you could even do in meeting Suzanne in the middle was saying, I know you asked me to wait, but I just put some of my thoughts on paper, so whenever you have a minute, can you take a look at it? Don't email it. Physically print it off. And what you'll do is when she sees that document, it will calm her nervous system. But because she doesn't see anything, that's going to have a different effect to it. So I think, you know, really kind of looking at it from how do you use psychology as well. But for your team, that's going to be very, very important for them, without a doubt. So I'll send you some samples of that so you can take a look at it.
That'd be great. We're gonna resume shortly. She's working with Mark for a long time. Because we don't even know the current situation of where everyone is. Right? So that's why it's gonna.
Yeah, yeah, but good exercise for you.
It'd be great to
Right?
have something prepared for.
Yeah, without a doubt. And even kind of, you can obviously adjust it and transition it. Anything else coming out as you're kind of looking at this? Anything really kind of resonating with you?
Yeah, the first few names I put in here is the ones I have a lot of conflict with, almost daily.
Excellent.
I've noticed, I definitely engage them in the right manner to help with the meeting, and we do solve things because of.
Perfect, perfect. And even your expression, be mindful of your expression. Are they falling more into extrovert?
I think they're both introverted, but when they need to, they get involved.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily for one, it's all voice. We don't see each other, so there's no body
Okay.
language.
Yeah,
And then the other one, probably I would say the authority thing, because they're a director, we can just laugh.
and that again, if you could talk about them first or the problem first, I hear what you're saying. I know it's important. Like, even if you do something like that and start with that, you're immediately going to calm their nervous system.
Yeah, we stay on task because of the way we do each other.
Okay, perfect.
He definitely has a good grasp of the emotional intelligence as well.
Wonderful. That's great. Ellie, your thoughts?
I kind of put a hodgepodge of people. So as far as my direct team, it's just one person under me. She's definitely very introverted. And I think I've developed a very good methods of, meeting in the middle there and how to approach that. People above me, I think, I don't know, can be kind of a mix of both depending on the situation, but, and then a lot of people, around that I deal with on a daily basis that, I would say probably are a lot of the reasons why I've kind of shifted towards being more of the extrovert at work and everything, because that's everyone around me. That was the way to get communication out.
Right.
And so I think that probably still has some ways to go as far as managing that effectively.
Okay. And what I would say to you is that from a tool standpoint, even your direct report, if you sent her a note and said, hey, how can I support you better in 2025? And you even gave her a list, just make sure what's going on in your head
Yeah.
is the reality. And it's always better to do a check with data. Can you prove yourself right? Because our internal self-awareness can actually be inflated. And when we ask teams, there's normally a disconnect. And we shared that in our last session.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that what's going on in your head is being actual. Even like if Roger says, hey, do you think like we're working in tandem? How do you think we could improve together? Like,
Said that.
yeah, perfect.
I went over there, like, here's the situation. How would you like to handle it when we bring it to you?
Yeah, like those type of things are just, it helps you, it helps them, like all of those things are great. Haley, your thoughts as you're looking through all this material?
I put my HR team and then I also put in general, like customer service managers and then upper management. So I feel like there's definitely a good blend between introverts and extroverts in there. And then just looking at like the first sheet, how they process emotions, I can definitely pinpoint which manager or which person on my team, how they react to the situation.
And do you feel like you have the language that very much can work within those different styles, whether it is that extrovert, whether it is that introvert? Yeah.
Just depends on who I'm speaking to. For the most part, I feel like I have a handle on most of the people, but then sometimes there's just one situation where they do react in a different way. So just learning how to react to that.
What's your workaround, right? Like, what is your workaround? Things of that nature. Yeah, very, very important. Okay, Matt, your thoughts?
So, felt it was easier to actually identify extroverts and introverts for me, and then I start to overanalyze. People are introverted, because some of them I would put in like a high D category, but I don't necessarily think that they're extroverts or they're in the middle, and then so I had a hard time with that. But definitely, how to manage people, talk to people, and figure out what their traits are and how they react to things.
Right.
Is a huge part of getting through the day.
And pretty much at Kenworth, everyone has an assessment. So if you want me to copy that, I can literally put people on the wheel and you can literally see where they fall and test your knowledge.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, I have one person who wants to do more, and is a extremely hard worker, but he is very just blunt when it comes to how to act to people, how to treat people. He's, you know, he'll basically be like, "You're an idiot." And,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
Yeah, that's not.
no one, you're not gonna go anywhere. No one is gonna work, you know, with you or for you if that's,
Mhm.
you know, their first reaction. And he's like, no one, you know, no one comes to me. I'm like, no one comes to you because they don't want to get their head bitten off.
Mhm.
So, you know, I'm trying to, like, there's a couple people I'm trying to be like, you're getting this out of everybody because this is how you act and how you do. And like,
Yeah, you're
that's
getting
stuff
very
that I've gotten
primal.
from other,
Yeah.
you know, from here
Mhm.
and stuff. And, you know, I try to not react. He's like, you don't blow up. I'm like, what good does it do? What, you know, if I just freaked out as soon as you walk in the office, are we getting anywhere?
Mhm.
That kind of thing. So trying to figure out how to meet in the middle and, you know, communicate better with people and, but definitely,
Mhm.
you know, different personality types and stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, no, the more you learn, the more you do, for absolute sure. Absolute sure. So questions about this, takeaways about this, anything more? Because what you're going to see is, I want you to kind of go to your homework section. So your homework, if you go back one page, it's an empathy map. This again is not going to be a exact science, but you are going to see that if you do have more extroverted tendencies, having empathy for people that are different than you are tends to be more of a challenge. If you are introverted and you you have more of an understanding because often you feel like more of a minority, you may have an easier time. What we're really trying to get into here, you guys, is we're trying to get into you taking somebody between now and the next time that we get together, and they've got to be in a different style than you are. So if you're more in that S&C, I'm going to ask you to be picking a higher problem solver, someone who is opposite of what you are. And I'm going to ask you to really kind of go through more of this diagnosis, because often in leadership, we think something about a person and we're not really giving thought and consideration to the fact that this could be coming from fear and uncomfortability versus somebody just trying to be obstinate. So that gentleman that you're giving the example of, right? That's his preferred style. And so he doesn't have a clue that that gets somebody else uncomfortable. He's just not self-aware. So for you, Matt, that would be a great person for you to try this empathy map on. So when you're looking at what is going on inside of his head and really kind of going through each one of these categories and filling it out for that person and trying to diagnose what is at the source of this. Like any type of affliction, if you can't get to what's at the source of this, you're going to have a very difficult time figuring out how to communicate with that person. Right? What's at the source of it? It could be ego that's at the source of that. You know, there's normally that very, very specific thing, but you're not going to be able to be flexible unless you really understand. If Alex has a client who's blowing his mind, is he just being primal, or does he feel maybe his job is in jeopardy? Is his status in jeopardy? What's at the root of it? Because the more you're trying to figure out what the root of it is, what's weird about this continual exercise is, if we put you in a high-res MRI machine and we looked at your empathy, and then we put you, thanks so much, Jean. Yeah. And then we put you in a position where you kept on trying to better understand, where is this person coming from? What fuel do they need? Not treating everyone like you prefer to be treated, but the way they prefer to be treated. You're going to start to see that empathy muscle literally is getting stronger. But if you're not working it out, it's like any other muscle, it's not going to get more understanding. So I'm a lot more empathetic today because I have been in a variety of situations where people have been very intimate with me and shared things about their life that makes perfect sense why they are the way that they are. I mean, go back to the beginning of emotional intelligence. Through nature and nurture, we were donated, right? And now you're seeing it display out in a variety of different places. But if somebody is operating from that fear, that defensiveness, that judgment, that blame, you're hearing that fear response. What are you doing to get them to the better version? How could you do that? I'm really asking you to give thought to who is that person, very much applying this material and then mapping out their map. Because when we get back together, I'm going to ask you who you picked, what did that experience feel like all of those things. I want you to come back with and be like, okay, this was what the experience was. How did it feel to you? How did it look at the end? What did you do well? What didn't you do well? Like all of those type of things. Because if we are afraid of someone, we have a very difficult time being empathetic for them. Because they're making us primal. They're not making us feel good. We don't step back and think that's their preferred communication. And they don't have any idea what it's actually doing. Like Jean and I had an individual yesterday in Rochester that she's very dismissive. She's either dismissive or she's crying. There's a lot of emotions around it, but none of them are healthy emotions. I get it. And then what she does is she takes you down this very personal journey. I'm getting a divorce. I didn't see this coming. Da 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 da. It's just not something somebody can connect to because it's related more to meanness. People want kindness. You can be direct and appropriate when it's appropriate to be direct. But other than that, you definitely want to be kind of given thought and consideration to it. What's going on in our head? Any questions about your homework assignment? You pick someone who's in a different style than you are. You've got a cheat sheet. And now you're really trying to assess, is this person coming from fear? And they might not be. Or are they coming from happiness?
Is this like, I mean, I'm trying to narrow down, is it a specific conversation with someone, or is this we're observing what's going on in situations with that person, between that person and ourselves, or kind of which realm does this fall in?
What do you think, as an example, is going to help you to develop more insight about people that are different than you are? So Matt gave a great example of someone who moves a message to the fact that he takes somebody to fear, right? So if Matt used him and said, hey, how do you like to be yelled at? And he was like, well, I hate it. Okay, did you ever think about maybe how you yell at people or how it's direct? Have you ever thought about that? And then he's covering what's going on in his head, right? Now that's something for him. He could have a high potential person in there and he could be a great person to coach him. But he can't coach him if he's avoiding him. He's just saying he's not promotable. Where I'm saying he's a hard worker. There's other attributes that you described about this gentleman that can make him perfect. So it's easy for us to dismiss people, and the brain wants to run from anything that's controversial. It doesn't matter whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. But that's what's going on in your head. Greatness is when you lean into that. And then he could literally take him through these different things, right? So anything for you, like for you, your direct report and what I challenge you with. Hey, I want to know, we've been working together now for X amount of time. And I've got this goal, I want to be a coaching leader. What do you think of that? Right? She'll give you an opinion, or she might not. Maybe it's too soon for her because she's a deep introvert. Did you think about it? Maybe you put those questions in a form and you just ask her to think about it. Whatever that situation is that is going to help you to develop to be better understanding of people that are different than you are. All right. And now in Haley's case, Haley might go through this with a senior level leader that scares the crap out of her. And maybe she doesn't have a conversation with that guy. Well, maybe she has a conversation with someone who knows that guy. And she said, this is what I think is going on. Can I get your opinion? Or maybe she gets two people's opinion from HR. But whatever it is that you think is going to make you more understanding and you're not getting into the snap judgment. Of course, Matt is going to think that. Because he's different, he's abusive, he sees the rain. But you're being an accessory to a murder if you're a leader that lets this continue. You've got to start pulling him back. You know, would he be a candidate for the first emotional intelligence or impact? Make the recommendation. Don't settle for what it is you're doing. What is it you could do? That's why Roger gets an order from Suzanne, who's very this. Every meeting with Suzanne starts the same way. No. And by the time we leave there, it's not a no. Nope, I don't like that. Do I have your permission to put it in writing? Yes. Okay. Okay. All right. Any other questions about that? All right. Anybody like to share some insights? How does this, Gina, how does this kind of relate to any, are you familiar with what their original goals were or?
Oh, I don't have that in
Okay.
front of me,
Okay.
but I did want to say, like, when you look at introverted S's and C's, I just want to make a point that introverted, make the correlation, they will be more extroverted once they know and trust. And I know this is what this whole point was about, but I just want to reiterate it because you may already have built trust with an individual that's an SS&C, and they seem very outgoing. They seem very, you know, well, they are team oriented. But I just want to make the connection.
And I think
And that
that's the
trust
thing,
is
Jack,
important.
when you kind of reflect on who's going to bring your leadership style to another person's attention, right? And largely they're going to do that based on the fact that there has not been a trust established with you. I don't think you have my back. You want me to do something, but you don't have my buy-in, which seems ridiculous because we're going to work, right? But in order for you to get that team all working towards it, I've got to understand the impact. And I still think there's a lot of things that are going on that we don't use job descriptions in a way that really we could use job descriptions in. This is, maybe you look at the job description, take that job description and say, Mary, this is how you matter to the customer service department. Maybe it's just a scaled down job description. Again, we're given all these forms and then we just comply with them. But is there a way that we can make them more impactful because people feel more engaged? And that's really where Jean's going with that trust.
Mm-hmm.
What they're saying is, if anybody goes and says, this is what Paula did, this is what Alan did, what they're saying is, they don't have my back. This person does not have my back. And that's a lot of what we ran into within your organization. The new leader didn't look like the old leader. And because there was not that transition, no trust. I don't have trust with this person who looks like this. I don't have trust for a person who's not dirty. Because that's what I see in construction. So if you don't look like that, your brain is automatically going to take you to that threat region. You don't look like that. So you have to just, all of this you have to be so mindful of. Takeaways. Oh, I see you thinking.
Yeah. It's the parent.
Yes.
Yeah, just having, I deal with a lot of different people because I'm a lot of my work is very project-based, so I'm dealing with sales, I'm dealing with quality, I'm dealing with, production people and supervisors, so I think for me to be mindful of my assessment of sort of where they're coming from and their extroversion versus introversion, and I'm usually coming from a more thoughtful sort of, internal processing type of viewpoint. That, what you had said before about sort of having ways to bridge that gap initially, is just say, like, and I'm working with an I think he's an extrovert right now. And just to say, like, I am hearing what you're saying, but but the way I'm approaching it is much more thoughtful.
And I think there's not enough of an introduction. Like what I do all the time is start at the beginning, and it doesn't matter how many times I say it. People need to be reminded. So just as a reminder, we're here to do this. I serve to make sure that your information gets appropriately communicated to this team. You even stating that will start us very much in the middle. We have a similar goal. See, for Roger to say, our goal is to be the best customer service department that this has ever seen. I don't know what that looks like yet. We've got some variables, but what I do know is your suggestions matter. So anybody who wants to email me anything, but when you don't move a message, what you're doing is you're letting my filing cabinet collect dust. And it will not see the light of day. You will not take them to the rainbow. And I want to be very, very clear on that. If they keep eye contact with you, you are not getting them to independently think. They are following your filing cabinet, not really coming up. That's why she didn't really talk about it from a neuroscientific standpoint, but when you walk, when you're in the forest, if we put you in a high-res MRI machine, your brain would be all these beautiful shades of green. It mimics that. And that's why we say go out and really think about just be, because you will be amazed as to what this outside environment will do for you. Like in that Rochester situation yesterday, I said to him, you should have just told her to go outside. It's freezing. Let her walk around the building once. That would have been super helpful. But what he did was he just tried to get out of his office because he was so uncomfortable with what she put him in. So again, what is the cure for this? So if you're always starting at the beginning, Alex is saying, look, at our goal here is to be a kick-ass project management team. We got some learning to do, both in competencies, both in how we work together, all of those things. But then he keeps on going back to how they're making that happen. The dopamine rises, and I feel very, very connected to this. But if this is what you got to do, and this is what you got to do, and this is what you got to do, or you let me guess, I'm always going to use the threat region of my brain, just about always, to make a determination. So if Roger is silent about this, I'm actually being freaked out. Especially if he's correct, and these are a lot of introverts, that makes them uncomfortable if they don't know what's going on. So again, how you move that message is incredibly important. So I think every time you're in training, you start at the beginning and any piece you added, you add to that. So they very much are seeing from an engineering standpoint, how this is coming together. Now you're at an impasse. Let's take a breath here. Is that fulfilling our goal? Because they'll get off on emotional tangents, but if you keep them at green, you'll calm their nervous system and then they'll be able to get back to it. Great leaders don't get a person to red because they're just proactive. They do everything they can to kind of fend off anything that potentially could happen. And then we just notice that we have the introverts and what they can do to meet more in the middle. You guys really study that. The extroverts, what you could do to meet in the middle, really study that when you do your assignment. Because you're going to be able to see. And the ways to communicate and the ways not to communicate in your assessment, I'm telling you guys, you should be studying that ad nauseum. Because you will learn so much about your communication style. We rarely look at the pages in that assessment. And I got to tell you, it's amazing. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Any other comments? Jean, anything you want to add on?
Not at this time, but I'm happy to take down those comments, questions and concerns, so I can put it in your progress report. So if anyone wants. Oh, I'll take those surveys. Or you can just hand them, keep them on your desk and I can collect them. But Matt, would you like to share any takeaways that I could update your progress report?
Guys, I'm gonna leave bags here too, because God, if anybody wants like a half a bagel or anything, please, 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 take it.
Aware of the communication about how I
We don't want all this left.
more don't communicate. Because I'll either overanalyze it or I'll just be more reserved and then
Mm-hmm.
I won't actually always tell somebody something or communicate it or, I even had where to 5 people about something on my team, but then 6 to 1, it's, you didn't tell me, nobody knew, and it's like,
You went
my
ahead
people
and,
about
okay.
it. It's making sure to
Let me know if you
to
need anything.
communicate it and to figure out people who've been, and of course, the one person is the one who's like morally offended that, I can't believe you didn't tell me. It's like, it's basically not to tell you, it's just,
Right, right. Was there a suggestion?
Yeah, she didn't like this
Where we
going.
have those type of people
So
who
that's what she
don't
was
want
like, I
person
said, I think he's going, I think he's gonna think it makes perfect
Don't put it
sense.
on here.
So
Not
just-
accountability, but
Check it out.
I'll go to it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
who's gonna
Yeah.
update this
You
person?
didn't do any spring break stuff.
I don't.
It's like you could use some.
And then-
Good idea.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what, cause like when we got this just turned on, who's gonna update people? Right, because she's not here, but someone has to take that responsibility and shouldn't always rest on
Right.
Joan's shoulders.
Friday night.
You know what I mean? Because you're the boss, I mean, you have to do that community.
Right.
You can let him list someone, maybe a little bit more outgoing than you, right? Not as reserved as you. Can be
Please
your
do that.
ambassador.
Take this
Yeah,
to everyone.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what happened to me, and I had that thing for a month.
No, but
Yeah. Yeah.
because, I mean, sometimes it helps or because it's, by the time you're done with the meeting, there's some other thing.
Something
Like,
else comes up.
I know there's already
I mean, I know
problems
people that
from
just book
just being
vastly
here that
expensive
try
tickets
to,
just to get the hell out of
try
here.
to ignore
They're
it.
like,
Like,
"Oh, the weekend."
if I start to focus on that or dwell on that, I'm
You
not gonna
won't
be
be
here and I'm not gonna
Yeah,
get
that's it, that's
what
right.
I wanna get out of this. So, by the time we come to the meeting,
now too, which
Yeah.
is unique, we typically
hey, there's something else
Well,
coming up
and my sister
and
was involved.
having someone like, all right, here's what we did, please communicate this
Right,
down
where she's
would
gone for 6
be
months.
helpful.
And she didn't help
Yeah.
that.
And even before you go into.
Talk to me about it, you know what I'll tell you. So she's
You know what I
like.
mean? Like, how can I
Just go there for a
get
month.
more insight
And
from
just
people
really
at the
hang
scene?
out there and
You
just
don't
make
always
sure
have
the
to
house
come
and
and be the
everything was
problem
okay,
solver.
because I got hit by the hurricane, and she
I-
was finished that.
And I was
And I
actually
really
thinking about
need somebody there and
that,
checking in and everything, and I'm like,
where, we have.
what am I
a meeting,
doing here?
Or we
I
have
got the
crew
three
meeting, we're supposed to
plates.
have crew meetings.
The thing about
And we have crew
coming here,
meetings.
kind of
You put some,
depressing.
hey, try to do better than that, hey,
Yeah,
try to
but
do that.
you've been here
But I
since
don't
the
talk.
hurricane.
Yeah.
At the team.
Right.
Really?
And,
And you were sad
Uh,
about Dairy Queen.
How about, how can we?
and it just, if there's no
Yeah, well, there you go.
collaboration or.
Well, it's not, I'm sure I haven't done this since the hurricane, but it's not touristy at all, which is.
Yeah, yeah, but it's not enough
I did
activity
it
for me.
Yeah, I
You
did it,
know, my
but if we
tendencies,
get
but
anything from it, it's
she's
better
got
because
everything
of
you
it.
can
And
imagine.
if we have a
She's got
change
bicycle
because
business,
of
she's got everything. So I've got
Even
my
if you
dips
change
in the
that
garage.
stuff, you gotta let them
So,
change
you
it
know,
out.
we're like using an
So
electric
even in the
bike,
next
we're using the
meeting,
Vespa,
like,
we're using,
sort
you know,
of
that type of
tell
thing.
everybody,
But in the
say
last
this is
hurricane,
what
we took
we need to
everything.
do.
Took the Vespa's everything.
I'm trying to change
Everything.
my leadership style, and the next meeting, we're gonna go and I'm gonna.
When we went down there,
need
there's
help
a spot.
and how.
Yeah.
we
We
can
walk
fix
down
that.
all the.
Yeah.
Would you like to know it a day
Yeah.
before? Would you like to know it the
Yeah,
morning before?
Yeah, all right, you
You're gonna
guys,
be able to make
take
the
care.
Thank you.
You gotta pepper them, cause you're gonna say like, what are your thoughts? And I have no thoughts right now.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can tell too, like, here, like. I
Guys,
mean,
just
we have so
reminder,
many
feel free to
meetings
take anything.
That, people, anything, no, okay, and no one says anything, where here, it's like, how do you feel? How do you feel? What about you? Where's your day? You know,
Yeah.
it's like coaxing something back from.
Yeah,
from
but
people. 'Cause
the reason
because-
why they need to be coaxed is because they're not used to being. They're used to being asked, but they're not used to be people really caring to hear.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So you have to remind them, like, look at, I want feedback, right? And pepper them to know that this is the expectations. And if they come blank slates, then it's just reinforcing.
Right,
Or maybe they need a one-on-one. If someone continues not to talk, that means they're not comfortable in the group. Roger. Appreciate you. Take some leftovers, please. And do you have a survey too, or is that, did I grab that already?
I have to.
Fill
We
it
have to
out?
for the next one, yes. I was bad.
Oh, okay,
I was very bad, so.
yeah.
So I will
You bring it,
do
okay,
that.
you have the opportunity to scan it. If you do it off hours or in hours,
Okay.
if you have the capability of scanning and emailing it to you, you can do that.
Okay.
Okay, don't forget your name tag.